Kevin, thanks for being with us today. Let's just jump in. Tell us what it's like to be the president of NAMB, and tell us kind of in an overview. Come on now, keep it clean. But tell us what it's like and what's going on there in terms of the things that the North American Mission Board does. Because a lot of us know there is a North American Mission Board. Right. I don't think all of us, probably most of us, know all the different things that you do.
Sure. Being president of the North American Mission Board is much better now than the last time I was here. I've been there 3.5 years. First 2.5 years it's very challenging. And if God ever tells you, if you ever feel led to leave the local church, I just want to encourage you, don't. And I told the Lord, I did this one time, but the next time, I'm going to take my chance on the fish swallowing me. I'm not going to do that. But at the North American Mission Board, we have our national strategy is called Send North America. And typically, that's what you'll hear more about than the North American Mission Board. The North American Mission Board is what empowers Send North America. But the whole idea is we're trying to send people to the Northeast, the Midwest, the West, and Canada because of how unchurched it is. In Mississippi, there's one Southern Baptist church for every 1,375 people. Southern Baptist church. In Canada, say in Toronto, there's one church for every 165,000 people. In New York, it's one for every 58,000. So basically, Southern Baptists have done very well in the SEC and the ACC. It's the other conferences that are going to hell. And so we're trying to convince churches in the SEC and the ACC to send their people to the Northeast, Midwest. And we're actually going to college campuses trying to encourage students who are engineer students, pharmacy students, to when you go to Philadelphia to engage in a church plant and help a church planter, it needs to be something more than just lead pastors. We have to have all hands on deck in order for this to really happen. 85% of North America live in or around major cities. Okay. And so our focus has been on those major cities. That's not the only thing that we're doing. We do other things as well. But our focus for the additional monies that we've been able to trim in our budget. NAMB has been through a process for you, if you're new to the Southern Baptist life, where we've downsized considerably. It was not an economical decision. It was more of a strategy decision. NAMB at its peak had 450 people at its headquarters in Merida. And this morning we had 133. Should be like 132 by lunch. But so we have downsized by over 300 people. And in doing that, you also take away their travel budgets. You take away all the money that they spent on things that we really didn't need done, and we try to prioritize. It wasn't that they were doing bad things. They were just doing a lot of good things and not the best things. And so we had to bring a sense of focus and did that, where I was so thankful when you introduced what North American Mission Board does. For years, when I first went there, I asked people, what do they do? And people really, they would jump around and try to guess. And to say, they help mobilize churches to plant churches in North America. That is what we do. We also
what else do y'all do besides?
We also do disaster relief. We're kind of the air traffic control for disaster relief. Every state convention has a disaster relief teams, but when a disaster happens, then we help station those states systematically around that disaster. We work real close with FEMA, and we're the third largest disaster relief agency in North America. We have the largest volunteer base of any agency in North America. So we do disaster relief, but also now we have that connected to church planting in the sense of we're coming behind those disasters and helping develop missional communities and making sure that it's connected to the church. The problem that we had in disasters is we were doing a lot of, we were helping, but not connecting the help with the hope of Christ. People appreciated the folks in the yellow shirts and what they did, but they didn't understand that we were coming because of the gospel. And so we're trying to connect the help with the hope. So disaster relief. And then we have several thousand chaplains all over the world. All the military chaplains are endorsed by the North American Mission Board and going through a challenge right now because of our national leadership and some of the situations they're putting our chaplains in as far as same-sex marriage and things like that. So we do that as well. But that too, we're using those military chaplains to help plant and revitalize churches as they retire, and also we're in the process of making sure there's a military-led church by every military base around the world. And we're so thankful to be able to work with the IMB and making sure that happens. And so,
how many SEND, SEND cities
either applies.
SEND cities. How many SEND cities are there?
There are 32 SEND cities. And when we first started out, we were going to focus on 10, then go to 20, and it just kind of caved in on me. I did not anticipate when people heard that NAMB had designated a city as a SEND city that they would look at that as making the NCAA basketball tournament or not. And so we started getting all sorts of pressure. And so we just said, let's go with these top 32 SEND cities. And what we've simply done is we've taken Match.com, gone church planning. All right. That's really, it's just eHarmony, go church planning, however you want, whatever fits your preference. But we, on those SEND cities, we went to each of those SEND cities, and we had local pastors and leaders tell us, where do you need the next 50 churches? And so if you go to our website and go to a city, you'll see a city plan that will come up and have dots on it. We encourage people to own a dot, for a church to own a dot, plant a church in a specific dot. And they'll tell you that's where the churches we think need to be. And then a church that's wanting to plant a church says, well, I'd like to do that one in Denver. And they may not have a planter, but we know of a planter that wants to plant in that particular area of Denver, and we'll connect the two. And so, but we had to come up. What was really sad is when I went I would go around the different parts of North America, and I'd say to someone, say in a state in the West, I said, tell me where in your city do you want the next 10 churches planted? And he's like, well, I wasn't expecting you to ask me that. If you give us a week or so, we can get that to you. And I'm like, how long have you been here? And like 5 years. Like, you're kidding me. You've been here 5 years and you don't know where your next 10 are coming from. And so, again, we transitioned that fella and come up with a city plan where we actually have people going to work for a living and help us know where those churches need to be. So we have a NAMB missionary in every SEND city. Their job is to recruit planters and recruit churches to invest in those planters. So there's a guy in Denver. We had that the other day. First Baptist Orlando wanted to plant a church in Denver. And then we matched him up with a planter who has a desire to plant a church in Denver, and they're doing that. And so it's really, really exciting to watch it work. Because you have to understand, when people say, NAMB does, and you said exactly right, we mobilize churches to plant churches. NAMB has never baptized anyone. NAMB has never planted a church. Churches plant churches. Right. And we want to come alongside churches and plant churches. We want to come alongside associations and plant churches. We want to come alongside state conventions and plant churches. But what we've had to make sure people understand is there would not be a state convention if they're not churches. There would not be an association if they're not churches. Churches plant churches. And so we want to come alongside all those groups to help mobilize them to see the need and plant churches all over North America.
Okay, let's move then from the sky view to the ground. And Tony, you have planted a church, Imago Dei, IDC. So tell us a little bit, first of all, what it was like to plant that church. And then secondly, what, if any, assistance you all received from Kevin and the North American Mission Board.
Okay. We have received a lot of generous assistance from NAMB. In fact, I have a tattoo of Kevin back here just to commemorate his great support of us. So, when I became a Christian in college and met Jim Shaddix when I was a college student and decided to go to seminary and study under him. And when I went to seminary, I didn't know anything about Southern Baptist. So I didn't know who Lottie Moon was. I didn't know what the cooperative program was. And I said when I went to seminary, I don't want to be a pastor. I'll do anything but that. And I went there and I took church administration of all courses that gave me a love for the church. And I began to think about what would it look like to start a church from the ground up. And so at that time, there was the Nehemiah Project. And so I was headed into that. And then our church planning profs left. They got relocated. And I was sort of left at that time, around 2000, 2001. There weren't a lot of people talking church planting outside of sort of NAMB and some church planting profs. And so I didn't really have a mentor. I didn't know really where to go at that time. So I decided to do a PhD because that's what people do when they don't know what else to do, So I did a PhD and just waited. And I loved Baptist. I loved Baptist doctrine, but culturally I felt a little out of place when I would go to churches and I would just look at pastors and I would think, I don't think I'm that guy. I don't think I could do that. But I do love the church, and I began to get a real robust theology of the church. And so I wanted my life to be poured in and through the church. And so it just took me a long time to basically finally plant a church. This was when I was in seminary, thinking about church planting. I was 23, 24. I eventually planted Imago Dei at 34. And I'm really glad it took 7 to 10 years before I planted, because I think I've done a better job than I would have as a young guy. So I did everything but plant a church. I lived vicariously through church planters. I pastored 2 more traditional churches. We helped plant churches. I even taught church planting. And so we started looking at cities, my wife and I. We have 5 kids. And so my preference personally would be live in the heart of a major city, Manhattan, Chicago. We didn't know how practical that would be. We didn't know really where to go in thinking through that. So we were considering Raleigh. We were looking at the trends of growth in RDU. I came up here to explore the city and meet with some local pastors, and I decided to swing by Southeastern Seminary on the way to the airport, and had a really gracious phone call by the time I got to the airport from a good professor friend, Dr. Keithley, asked me if I had any interest in coming here to teach. And so then it was a whole new dynamic of I didn't know what we were going to do to make ends meet. We were hoping to get support, but at that time it was, I can go teach at a great school under a great president and plant a church in a growing city. This seems to be winning. And so we stayed another year where we were at in Mississippi. Really good church, left really well. They supported our church plant efforts, and came here, started meeting across the street in my house with about 15 people. We had 7 people move up from Mississippi to be part of our church plant. They didn't have jobs. They came up. They were not students. And they're deacons now and worship pastor. Just really awesome servants. We then began to try to spread the gospel and form a team, and launched our church 9/11/11. And so we're almost 2.5 years old now. And along the way, our very first gift came from NAMB. It was a really wonderful, generous gift. And then as we were growing, we were having facility challenges, and we needed some help financially. And so NAMB again came through with a really wonderful gift. And so again, that's why I have the tattoo. They've just really supported us from the beginning, and we're so appreciative of them. Yeah.
Okay. Chuck, let me ask you, you served for a long time in the Billy Graham School of Missions, Evangelism, and Church Growth at Southern, and as dean. And so as a result of that, you were interfacing not only with the International Mission Board, but the North American Mission Board. What would you say are some of the changes you've seen take place under Kevin that really encourage you and that excite you, and that you say this is a good direction for Southern Baptist to be going? Because I'm sure you've seen massive adjustments in how the North American Mission Board functions.
Sure, it's changed considerably over the last 3 years, and I think I think Kevin told us what happened for NAMB is what happens for so many different organizations, and that is that you start out with a focus and you wind up going into mission drift. You add on other responsibilities and other things you can do and other assignments from the denomination, and you lose that focus. And what Kevin has done, I would say first he's brought us back to this laser beam focus on church planting. That's what we're about. There may be other things you do, but even as Kevin talked about disaster relief, it is you do that, but you also make sure you're giving the hope that this restoring to evangelism and church planting, I think, is critical for us as a denomination and for the North American Mission Board. Second, I would say he's helped us go back to what is the biblical precedent of churches planting churches. That you have send churches that are supporting your church planters, and that's right on target. And then the third thing I really like, and perhaps you can talk about your farm system, I like Kevin's approach, his team's approach to connecting with young people so that we can raise up our church planters who are denominationally wise. We can help them be biblically sound, And we raise up the next generation of Southern Baptists and evangelicals that reach North America.
Kevin, you were a pastor for how many years?
Total, I mean, it was at Highview for 14. I don't know if I've ever really added it all up. But
what did you learn in the pastorate that you were able to bring to the North American Mission Board that allowed you, in your perspective, to serve well there? What was that you learned in the pastorate that was really helpful to you as you got to the North American Mission Board?
Sure. When I was a pastor, I had, I think, I felt like a pretty accurate view of NAMB. And when I got there, it was as bad as I had thought it was. I told the search committee, like, you don't understand, as a pastor, and I feel like pastors look at you in a way that you know, it's not like it's bad, it's atrociously bad. The way you spend money, there are things, it doesn't take you know, a very skilled surgeon to look at some things and say, look, that's just not right. And
let me interject so that y'all get perspective on this. When I had the joy and the labor of serving on the Great Commission Resurgence Task Force, our committee of 20 came to the conclusion that the North American Mission Board was broke. In fact, we thought it was so broke, we actually contemplated recommending to Southern Baptists to shut it down. And so when Dr. Ezell speaks of stepping into a hospital with a patient that was on life support, he is not exaggerating. It was so bad that we were not sure that it even was worth continuing. And the fact of the matter is, there's a sense in which I think, Kevin, from the very beginning, it was set up to be dysfunctional in the interconnectedness that's part of our polity. It is what it is, so we have to find a way to negotiate and navigate that. But just one example, and then I'm going to get right back to you. You're here, you believe God's called you to be a church planter, and so you decide, I'm going to go to New York. Well, here's the deal. You would have to have the approval of the local association. You would have to have the approval of the state convention. You would have to have the approval of the North American Mission Board. And if any one of the three decided to veto you, you're done. Now, you can still go, but you're not going to get any funding from the North American Mission Board. You're not going to get any funding from the state convention. You're not going to get any funding from the local association. One of the three, for whatever reason, could veto you, and you were done as far as being able to work through how we're set up.
that's how it used to be.
Right.
Yeah, that's not how it is.
No.
That's how it used to be. And it was really bad. I remember when I told them, they said, well, what do you think of as a local pastor, what do you think of the North American Mission Board? When the search committee at NAMB asked me, I said, honestly, I view you like I do the Montreal Expos. And they said, the Montreal Expos, they don't exist. And I said, you won't either, you know, if you don't change. I said, you basically you have a New York Yankee bank account, and you're the Montreal Expos, and Southern Baptists deserve better. You've got to blow this thing totally up. And the only way that I won't go there is if you've got my back, if I do that.
And your trustees did.
And my trustees did. And, of course, I was, in a sense, I really, honestly, I know sometimes people say these things they don't really mean. I really have a high admiration for the pastorate. I prefer the pastorate. If I had my choice, personally, I would be pastoring. But I know God's called me to do this. But I prefer pastoring. My dad has such a high view of pastoring. It was real funny when I told him, hey, look, Dad, NAMB's talking to me. And he's like, well, okay, but, you know, it's not pastoring. And I said, I know. And so when I called him the day they voted me in, I said, hey, Dad, I just got voted in as president of the North American Mission Board. He says, well, that's good. You going to sell your mower? And that was the conversation. And so I've always been taught, I mean, you just have a high view of the pastorate. So I try to explain to them that, look, you have so discredited pastors. And for instance, to give you an example of how dysfunctional, then we'll move on. But 2 weeks before I went to NAMB, I knew I was going. No one else did. They hadn't announced it yet. And our niece knew they were going to vote on me. And there was a student at Southern. I pastored near Southern. And had applied at NAMB. Well, on his application, he had to have a pastor recommendation. I said, under no condition would I make this guy a missionary of anything. He does not have the competent nor the servant's heart. He's arrogant, and I would not hire him, and I'd encourage you not to. And he came into my office a week later and says, I don't know what you said, but thank you so much. They approved me at the North American Mission. I said, well, how about that? And so the next week they voted on me, and I promise you, the very first day, I didn't know my secretary by name at the time, but I said, could you track down who approved this name? And so we can de-approve him. And so, but that was systematic, because what I'm saying is to see, look, you looked at what the pastor recommended, and you totally ignored it. And to me, it should be the exact opposite. Churches should plant churches. People local on the field know much more about that person than someone in an office at NAMB would know. And you've got to trust the pastors and the churches. And I mean, you got to have Antiochs out there who are saying, and we just got it all backwards. And so that's the reason we had such a transition and freed that money up so we can put it toward churches. We want to come alongside sending churches and give those sending churches money to help support. And again, we support plants. We try to because we want that plant to exist whether the planter stays or not. And so we're about planting churches, not planting planters.
Let me ask you a question for all three of you, and each give your perspective, which will be probably complementary but a little bit different. What do you look for in a church planter? In other words, what kind of gifts, what kind of mindset, what kind of man are you looking for as someone that you think will have a really good chance of succeeding as a church planter? And Chuck, you can give it to us from the seminary perspective, Tony, the local church, and then Kevin, from where you sit there at NAMB.
Yeah, I would look for someone, first of all, who senses some kind of calling, because not everybody's called to do church planting. And I worry that some folks turn to church planting simply because they don't want to work with the established church. So I want to hear some sense of calling. I want someone who walks in godliness, who's prayerful, because you're tackling something from the ground up. I would prefer to have someone who is entrepreneurial, who's thinking in terms of how do we do this differently? How do we go to a city where we can't have a building, and how do we connect with those people? And then someone with a stick-to-itness that says, I've got a vision and I'm going to live that out under God's grace. So some of those things I would look for.
Okay, Tony? Because your church, I imagine, is already thinking about sending out. In fact, you are already sending out church planters. So what have y'all done at IDC, and what have you looked for?
Well, I think theologically sound. The pastor is the theologian of the local church, so I want these guys to have a good theology of the church, of church discipline, of all the important doctrines of the faith. He has the qualification of 1 Timothy 3, character qualifications. I think it's important for him to have the ability to lead, for him to have the right motives. So he's not just planting because he can't find a church. He's not planting because he wants to be Mark Driscoll. He has really prayerfully thought through his motives for doing this. And I think a church planter needs to have if you can call it a gift of evangelism. I really think church planters need to at least be able to communicate to the unchurched unbeliever particularly well. So those are some of the things I think about.
Okay, Kevin, from the headquarters there in Atlanta.
I want to remind the students, it's kind of an advertisement. We are providing a lunch, and they have some extra lunches available. We're going to talk about call and some things in specific, and we can be a little bit more direct, non-tweetable opportunity we have to discuss some things. But obviously, both of what they said, what we look for is someone who has a determination or a passion of whatever it takes. I use a scripture in Mark chapter 2 about the paralytic, where the four friends brought the friend to Jesus. They couldn't get him in, and so they had to come up with a game plan. They had to call an audible and say, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? You know, we should come earlier. We don't know. Well, they said, because Mark doesn't tell us the details, but we do know what they came up with. They said, hey, let's put him up on the roof. Let's dig a hole in the roof, a big hole, and let's lower him down because, and again, we're not told their names. I just want them to be church planners because their heart and passion was, I don't care. We're going to do whatever it takes to get this guy to Jesus. Whatever it takes. If that means doing something we've never done before, it's not like they tore a hole in the roof every time they got together. It didn't happen. This is the first time, perhaps. And they were determined to do whatever it takes. I mean, I love that thought. I mean, somebody had to come up with that idea. You can imagine him explain it to the other three. Now, guys, I got this idea. It's going to sound crazy. But I'm telling you, it's going to work. We're going to get everybody up on the roof. We're going to dig a hole and lower him, and boom, that will work. What do you think? Now, I love that guy. I want that guy on my team, you know?
All right. What I hear you saying is, and piggybacking on my two brothers, you care deeply about where one is in terms of their biblical convictions and theology.
Absolutely.
But you're more than willing to facilitate their creativity in their particular context to do whatever it takes to share the gospel well where they are.
Absolutely. My fear is that we have some incredibly gifted, intellectual, theologically astute students who are pansies.
I agree.
And when it comes to ministry, they
especially the men.
Oh, no, that's who I'm talking about.
Thank you.
But no, I don't mean you're allowed to say that.
Pansy?
I apologize if.
No, you don't need to apologize.
Okay, I thought we were Southeastern.
It's time for little boys to sit down and the men to stand up. We got 331 Journey girls on the International Mission Field and 126 men on the International Mission Field. We've got 50 journeymen in West Africa, 48 females and 2 males.
No, absolutely.
Time for the pansies to hit the bricks and the men to stand up and do what God has saved them and called them to do.
Absolutely.
I think he agrees with you.
Dude.
He agrees with you.
No, that's my fear. Seriously, guys, it's not that they're not well prepared theologically. I mean, I think they are being, but some of them just never had a real job. You know, they don't know what work ethic is. And that scares me. You know, mowing the lawn, underneath them. I mean, we used to start our interns at Highview. We've made all of our interns work in the maintenance area for a few months before they were allowed to do anything else. And if they're too good for that, they're just too good for us. They don't have a servant mentality because they're so intellectually superior. This sense of arrogance. You know, see, when I tell our church planners, what scares me about our church planners is they care and passionate about things that nobody else cares about. Now, they're legitimate theological topics, but the guy's trying to keep his marriage together. He's trying to find a job. He's trying to parent a 15-year-old that's rebellious. You know, and in fact, if he has deacons or elders, it's just not high on his list. He's just sucking wind, you know. And I'm not saying that discussion's wrong. I'm just saying when some of these guys go to churches, they want to talk more about if there's a Santa Claus or not than if the guy's going to have food or not. You know, and these things are just not that, you know. You've got to stay focused on its people. You've got to love people. And Danny, I had, as you know, we would invest in students at Highview, and I went and had to bring a pastor home who'd only been on the field 6 months. His church, they said, the deacons called me and said, we're going to fire this guy, and you need to help us do that. He's yours. You're one of your students. And so I went and tried to fix everything and said, hey, what can I do to stop this? He said, you can't do anything to stop it. We're going to fire him. But we can at least make this landing a little softer. Well, come to find out, the church ran 50. He'd been there 6 months. And they said, he's brilliant. He's very smart. I said, well, what seems to be the problem? He said, he doesn't know our names. Wow. He said, there's only 3 of us, the 3 deacons. Daryl, and Daryl. And he said, He doesn't know our name. And I said, you mean like your name? He said, I promise you, you put the three of us up, he could not name us in order. And he said, we're not hard, mean people, but we're just regular folk, want to serve the Lord. We love the Lord. But we got a guy that wants to pastor us. And what I always try to tell students is, look, people overlook a lot of incompetencies, but the lack of love and genuineness, they will not. So I just beg you to understand, and I'm thankful for the theological preparation, but you have got to love people. If that's in Vancouver, Toronto, Miami, Atlanta, wherever it might be, they desperately, they can see through that. And that's one of my biggest concerns.
All right, let me ask you one more question, then we're going to end with a general question for everybody. Why should this student body believe in the Southern Baptist Convention Cooperative Program, and in particular, why should they be motivated to support financially, as well as with their prayers and other things, the North American Mission Board?
Right.
Make your pitch.
All right. One, I really do believe our best days ahead. It's a transitional time for the Southern Baptist Convention, but and there are doomsdayists out there, but people not wanting to connect with denominations. I'm having conversations with people who are not a part of our denomination, who really want to be and wish they had a mother, if you will, a denomination to belong to. I believe that Southern Baptists have one of the finest missions resourcing methods through the cooperative program that exist. Now, have we been as good as stewards in the past as they should have been? No. And that's why I tried to invest 3 years of my life trying to turn around something to be a better steward. Tom Elliff, IMB, same thing. There's a lot of changes going on. And the very best days are ahead. What we desperately need are young pastors to engage. And where I made a mistake at Highview, I got frustrated with the system. And so I disengaged. I am not going to those pathetically boring meetings, and I'm not going to, they don't have a clue. And you know what? You're going to go to some of those things. If you go to an associational meeting or some other meetings, you're going to think, oh, my word, what a waste of time. I just want to encourage you. These are days of change. In order to change, you have to engage. And now is the time to engage and not pull back, to go forward and take it for the team. And the only way to get the right people in the right position, have the right people in the right positions, to put the right people in the right positions. You have to be a part of it. And so, man, when I go to those different convention meetings and all, and see young ministers out there, it just so encouraged me, because they're staying in there, even though, hey, it may be hard at times and they may not do it just like you do it, but we can turn this thing, but we have to have you engaging. And I'm telling you, we resource where they will. We just got to continue to be good stewards. And I'm just very, very hopeful and have a great deal of expectancy for the future. So.
All right, last question, and I'll answer it, because I want these students to know about something. What is Southeastern doing, and what would you say to our students, whatever you want to, in the context of how we're trying to serve the churches and serve NAMB in terms of church planning? This last semester, we have now approved a Master of Arts in Church Planning, which we crafted in partnership with the North American Mission Board. Now, don't run away from here, but the one component of it is it's a completely online degree, so that people that are already out there being mentored in a church, being ready to be launched, can be doing this program of study right where they are. They don't have to move here. On the other hand, if you are here and you believe that God has called you to be a church planter, there are a number of classes in that program of study that we're happy for you to avail yourself of, because they are intentionally designed for those who are going to be involved in church planting. So we have a Master of Arts in Church Planting. Let me say this. It is designed primarily for those on the field. It's a shorter degree. Doesn't have everything we'd want them to have, but at least has the basics. You're here. You're in a much more advantageous position to get much more than they are capable of doing. Most of them would want to come here, but for whatever reason, many of them are tent makers. They're bivocational.
A lot of bivocational.
In fact, most of them.
Most of them.
And so we're trying to provide that service in that kind of way. So I'm very grateful that the North American Mission Board approached us about it. We're partnering together on that, and we think it's going to really help some guys out there in the field who otherwise would not be able to get any kind of training. They're now getting degree training that specifically is geared for who they are and what they're trying to do.
Right.
Chuck, what would you want to say to our students?
In addition to that, we have Dr. Dodson on our faculty, thanks to the North American Mission Board, as NAMB helps us support Dr. Dodson's position. Then at the doctoral level, I would add to that we have a PhD with a focus in international missiology and North American missiology. And we have several of our IMB folks here training this week. And I'll tell you, in my experience with those students, we have some of the sharpest practical strategists who are combining academic training with practical training that I have ever worked with. And it's a great program. And so for all of our students, I would say, even if you're thinking about how do I just get through this semester, I want to encourage you to think even long term. How can I continue to get training at the doctoral level in these practices?
Tony?
I think the EQUIP program is awesome, how we're giving theological education through the local church, and so pastors are teaching and also mentoring their guys. I have the privilege of doing that at our particular church, and so we've taken 12 guys through an 18-month program. Now we have 20 guys in the program, and in addition to the teaching, we try to mentor them. I've taken trips with guys to Boston, to Buffalo, etc. I think the more we do that on site with local pastors, I think that's going to be a beautiful partnership. I think Southeastern's starting to do more in terms of business as missions, and I think that's going to be very important as guys look to plant churches in areas where they need a job, and team members that go with them need a job. As we begin to think through those particular issues, I think that's going to be helpful also. And as Dr. Lawless said, myself, Dr. Dodson teach church planting. We're having a church planting dinner the Thursday night before Ecclesia with Steve Timmis and Dahadi Lewis to talk about planting in London, in Europe, and also in urban cities. So we're always thinking about what can we do for the students to continue to fan the flames and equip them well through particular events like this. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Last question then, Chuck. If someone is out here today and as a result of our time, man, I would really like to look more into the possibility of being a church planter, who can they contact here? What would be the best avenue?
I would start with Dr. Dodson or Tony, Dr. Merida.
And then we'll walk them through from there.
That's right.
All right.
Or go to Mobilize Me on the
That's
NAMB
true.
website.
Go to the NAMB website. That's right.
Guys, thank y'all for serving us well this morning. Guys, would you give them a hand and say thank you for helping us out today? Thank you.